Okay, it looks like we are live. Hi guys, it's Lauren and Mary for today's webinar. 5 things every woman should know when she's starting out her career. If you guys can hear us and see us, feel free to let us know in the
Lauren, I'm going to feedback for both you and I. Do you hear feedback?
Yeah, there's a bit of echo.
Okay, I'm going to try to refresh it.
Yeah, do that.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Sorry guys. Okay, it looks like good. So I'm good. Mary's joining us. Hopefully there's not an echo.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Mary, do you have headphones?
Let me go grab some.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
Okay, let's try this. Hold on one second. All right. Let's see if this helps. Does this help? Wait.
Oh, I think that's better.
Okay, so is my...
Yeah, that's a lot better. Hey guys, if you can hear us and see us and it's not echoing, let us know in the chat.
Okay, I have a major echo in mine still. This is odd.
All right, looks like Mary might be a little frozen. I'm going to refresh just because maybe that will help with some stuff.
Let's see if this works. Oh man, I still have a crazy feedback.
Mary, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I still have a major echo, and so do you, for me at least.
So do you have multiple tabs open?
Yes.
Okay, so close out of the other tabs. That's what they're telling me on Crowdcast. That might help.
Oh, I think that did it. Let's see.
Cool. Thank you guys for your patience and letting us know. Oh, Mary, you're going to want the headphones again.
It's funny, we tested and tested and tested this, and everything was perfect, and then you go live, and it's like...
I know, we had a whole conversation for 30 minutes before this, and there was no echo. So we'll go ahead and get started. Mary, are you
I'm just making sure all the tabs are okay. Tabs are closed.
Cool.
No echo. Let's do this.
Cool. Let's do it. We're ready. We're going to go before any other things happen. Hey guys, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Lauren McGowan, the founder of Career Contessa. If this is your very first webinar, feel free to let us know in the chat. I always like to know if this is your first one, and I can kind of give you some pointers on how the webinars function. But oh, cool, Colby, thanks for joining. Danielle, awesome. And if you guys have any problems during the webinar, it's always great. Wow, so many people, it's the first time. I love it. If anybody's having trouble at any time, just try refreshing the browser, and then working on, or having the browser be Chrome is actually kind of a best practice as well. So if you have any issues, feel free to do that. Also, everything that we're doing today is being recorded, so you guys can watch the replay at any time afterwards.
I can watch what I'm saying, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have literally everything on video for you afterwards. So we'll go ahead and jump into it because we've got a lot to get to. Thank you so much for asking or submitting some questions. So those of you, most of you are already trying to have figured out how this works, but there's the live chat function on, well, at least for me, the right-hand side. And then if you guys have any questions, you can add them below the screen to the Q&A, and Mary will be answering them at the end. And what's kind of cool about those, especially, is that we can record Mary's answer to your specific question. So if you watch the replay, say. You can watch the whole thing, or you can just listen to her answer. So a lot of cool capabilities with this. So we'll go ahead and get started. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this topic, and Mary, you know this very well, having 3 totally different types of careers, is that starting out your career is really special. It's kind of this fresh start. It's sort of the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to specialize in this thing, or I want to do this right. And so I like fresh starts. I think I always liked school for that reason. It's like you got a fresh start every semester. And you've had 3 really different careers. You've worked in finance, you have a blogging career, and now you're also a tech entrepreneur. So I thought it would be great if we started by you just giving us an overview of kind of your story. You know, how did you go from finance to where you are now? And then we'll get into Mary's, specifically her 5 tips, guys.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to join you. I'm such a fan of yours and everything you've done with Career Contessa. I think that, you know, providing women with these kinds of resources is so important, and is actually a big reason why I started my blog, which is memorandum.com. So a little bit of background on me. I grew up in Wisconsin. I went to Georgetown and studied economics, and then went straight into finance and worked for an investment bank on Wall Street to start my career. I was always very interested in the arts, very creative, but I think that for whatever reason, I always had the perspective like, that's not a real job. Like, who works in fashion? Like,
Yeah.
And so, you know, I am sort of a strange case in that I really enjoy math and sort of the analytical sort of business side of your brain, in addition to the creativity. And so the sort of business path, that traditional path, seemed to be the safer one. And so that's where I started. And so it was in my sort of starting my career in finance that I first stumbled upon fashion blogs. And, you know,
sort of interesting. Those worlds don't usually collide.
Right. It was very sort of random. And I was amazed at the ways in which these female entrepreneurs all over the world were connecting with women in such a real way, and were really providing this kind of cool, authentic, relatable platform. And as I sort of looked around at the fashion blogs that existed, this is 4 years ago, I thought that, you know, there really wasn't anything that spoke to my demographic, that young, urban, professional woman that cares about fashion and wants to incorporate it into her life, into her working life, her life in and out of the office in a sort of realistic way. And so that is what sort of spurred me to start memorandum.com. A really, you know, another really important part of sort of my story in starting Memorandum was the fact that I was at an entirely male-dominated sort of, I was in an entirely male-dominated professional environment. And what was so interesting to me, you know, I was involved in the women's organizations at the bank that I was at. And there was a lot of dialogue about career advancement and sort of the unique challenges that women face in the workplace. But there really wasn't anything that spoke to, you know, professional style. And I felt that that was important to talk about. And I felt that that was actually, you know, holding back a lot of women that I knew, a lot of my colleagues, and a lot of my friends. And what was so interesting to me that I didn't realize until I had started working was, you know, we're the first generation of women that are entering the workforce in the numbers that we are. And what's really interesting about that is that so many, you know, I realized so many of my friends didn't have a working mother. So they didn't grow up.
I didn't.
You did. So I happened to grow up. My mom's an attorney. I grew up seeing like a cool girl boss go to the office every day, put on a suit, and do her thing. And so that was so fascinating and eye-opening to me when I was just starting my career, that some of my best friends who are so talented and just amazing in every way were like, what does a professional woman look like? Like what do I wear to the office every day? And so it was kind of, it was that combined with the fact that in my own professional environment, there were no senior, I mean, there were senior women. There were very few senior women. I never worked for a managing director that was a woman. And so with sort of that dearth of professional, like female mentors and people to look up to in the office, and then also seeing, so many of my female colleagues didn't have a working mother at home, I thought, this is something that I'd really like to speak to and sort of create a platform where that topic is broached. And so anyway, so it was sort of in the building and growing of Memorandum that the content has expanded to really speak to all aspects of the working girl's life and sort of just what it means to be a modern woman, both in and out of the office. Excuse me. And so in the development of Memorandum, which I did while I was still working in finance, my husband also has a background in investment banking and private equity, and specifically in technology. And it was in, things that we were seeing in sort of the e-commerce space, in the mobile space, that led us to the development of Trove. So in addition now to running Memorandum, my style blog, I'm also the president and co-founder of Trove, which is a mobile style and style inspiration and shopping app that brings together sort of all of the content of your favorite fashion bloggers into sort of one searchable, shoppable place on your phone. And what led us to the development of Trove was really seeing how, fashion bloggers were moving from being this like fringe element thing in the fashion and retail industries and really becoming sort of the powerful center of these industries and totally changing the landscape of traditional media, fashion media, certainly. And so it was interesting. I would see it with my own followers that were sort of discovering things on Instagram, for example, but really frustrated that there was no easy way to shop it or seamless way to go from the content to the shopping experience. And moreover, I would say that consumers across the board, myself included, have such a difficult time finding sort of that kind of robust style inspiration, whether they're on their phones or online. It's been really interesting, especially early on when we were beta testing Trove and seeing users come in and say, oh my gosh, there is no other sort of centralized hub where you can search for what to wear to my upcoming beach vacation, or what to wear to a holiday party, or search for a specific product. If you've got a summer wedding coming up in the future, you could maybe Google it, and then you'll see only retailer ads or a an article from Vogue from 3 years ago. Otherwise, where do you go to find sort of chronologically relevant, fully shoppable style inspiration? You can search hashtag wedding style on Instagram or Pinterest or something. And
no, that'll take forever.
Yeah, and then you're gonna see somebody's foot and a picture of somebody's baby, and then you might find something that you actually like, and it's not shoppable. So we really wanted to provide, we wanted to provide consumers with that sort of centralized one-stop shop for that kind of high quality style experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because even Pinterest now, it's like you can type in, what to wear to a wedding, and you'll find some stuff, but now they've got the ads everywhere. I miss the old Pinterest. I miss the old Instagram. I'm totally a fan for bringing them back, but we were talking earlier, you know, having a different platform for everything is so, it's just so annoying. And sometimes you can't even remember what platform you use for XYZ. So it's so interesting too, because finance led you to blogging, and blogging has led you to tech. And I think that's a really good lesson. And I know it's not part of your 5 tips, but a really good lesson that whatever career you start out in isn't the career you have to stay in, you know? And just because you're not sure where, you know, maybe when you were in banking, you were like, this was the safe career. I don't really, maybe I'm not like overly passionate about this, but be okay with sort of the unknown a little bit too, because it's amazing how those opportunities will lead to other things. And so I think that's a really interesting, I find your story really interesting. I also find it really cool because everyone's sort of wondering, what are these bloggers going to do, right? What are these influencers going to do? And we're seeing some are creating, you know, clothing lines, others are kind of spurring off to create other products. You're definitely getting into the technology side. So it's really, I find it really fascinating to kind of be like, where will these platforms and these influencers go next? And I completely agree. This is the largest generation of women working, and we are not going to be a one-size-fit-all generation. We're going to be interested in, you know, life and work and all the passions that come in between. And I just think you made a really interesting point that here you are working in finance, a really male-dominated industry. As a woman, you had, you know, a mother who worked, and so that was a really interesting role model for you. And I'm excited because I think, I mean, all my friends work, and so we're becoming each other's role models. Even if I didn't, you know, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I know that's the toughest job ever, but it's different. You know, the workplace is full of gray zones, like more gray zones than black and white zones, you know. So but okay, let's get into your 5 tips because they're really good, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions on the end, at the end, to answer the reader questions. So let's start with tip number 1.
Tip number 1. So these 5 tips are things that I've either I've run into personally and struggled with, or I've seen close friends or colleagues of mine really struggle with, and I think that they're very important to keep in mind, sort of, especially when you're starting your career, but in no sort of particular order. I'll start with one that's so important, and that is that attitude is everything. And what I mean by that is, especially when you're starting your career, there are, and I'm going to talk about this in a few of my top 5, but I think that you have to remember, when you're starting a job, you don't have a track record. You don't have a resume to point to that. I mean a real sort of robust, meaningful, professional resume and track record. And so you have to think about the things that people are going to judge you on, to base sort of professional opportunities upon. And so, you know, I think I've seen across the board, it's the people with the positive can-do attitude that leave their crap and baggage at the door and come in and are always just even keel, reliable. Yes, I'm happy to jump in and do that. You know, I think that especially, you know, people starting their careers have trouble coming in and think, you know, it's like, oh, I went to this great school, or you know, I'm this talented person, whatever it is. I should be able to jump into a company and be like, you know, some sort of executive or doing this high level work. And I've seen so many really talented people get held back because they see certain sort of, whether it's an administrative task that you're asked to do when you're first starting out, or just some other sort of part of the job that they feel is beneath them, that really can hold people back. And so sort of your willingness to jump into anything, not treating anything as if it's beneath you, or, you know, somehow like, you know, oh, well, I'm not interested in that, so I'm just not going to do that part of the job. I think that having that kind of really positive attitude and willingness to jump in and get your hands dirty, no matter what it is, can be so much more impressive to your bosses than perhaps like the more sophisticated things that you might be doing. You know, one example that I can give, probably a ton of examples for this, but one example is I had a friend who was sort of struggling with her job, and she wasn't like great at it, but she had such an awesome attitude. Everybody she would see, she was like, "Hey, how are you? What can I," and she was like just this she had this amazing energy and was so likable that at her company, when there was a round of layoffs, there were people who were maybe technically more skilled or driving better results who were laid off before she was, because she was known to be just that like amazing sort of positive person that was just willing to jump in. And so I think that is something that you should always keep in mind, because you have a bad day, you had a fight with your boyfriend, whatever, like everybody has those things.
Everyone does.
And it's so toxic to come into a work environment where you just don't know, oh gosh, like, Susan's got XYZ issue that she's all ticked off about, and it's kind of dragging down the rest of the team. So anyway, I think that having that sort of positive attitude and being sort of like reliable in that way, where you're just this even-keeled, steady Eddie person,
I completely agree.
I think is so important. And the other thing that I would emphasize, that's kind of rolled up into this one is again, that willingness to do everything, even the like crappy administrative things. I like very, very early on when I was starting in finance, my a boss who was not my direct boss, but sat sort of close to our group, his administrative assistant was sick, like super sick for a couple days. And, there were a lot of people that I worked with that were like, I'm not okay, like, sorry, your admin is sick, but like, I'm not making your restaurant reservation. Like, I'm not going to call the car service for him, but I did, because just like my willingness, I think, to just like jump in and do it, really ended up like catapulting me in a lot of ways with not only that manager, but other managers, because they saw me as someone who was just a part of the team, and not treating certain tasks as sort of like beneath me or below my pay grade, or it's insulting for me to make a restaurant reservation for him for lunch, whatever it is. So I think that really can work wonders.
Yeah, and I like to tell people, even if you hate your job, just be the guy that comes in every morning and says good morning to everybody. Like, nothing is more unpleasant than the guy that comes in that doesn't like their job, and then gives you that look like, I'm so unhappy to be here, I hate my life. It's like, start by saying good morning. And someone put a quote in the chat that said, it's attitude, not aptitude, that gets you ahead. And I think attitude.
I love that.
You can't recruit people that have great attitude as easily as you can recruit people that have the skills. So that's a really irreplaceable skill to have too.
Yeah. So my second one is to always think macro. So while you may not love every part of your job early on, I think it's always important to keep the big picture in mind, whether this is remembering sort of your boss's goals, and when you're doing a project for your boss, and just keeping in mind, like, not just the specific task that you've been asked to do, but why have you been asked to do this? How does this fit into the broader picture of what your boss's goals are and your company's goals are? So whether it's thinking macro in that sense, which will allow you to be so much more helpful to your boss in anticipating his or her needs, or if it's applying this mentality to sort of your general career goals. So just thinking about how perhaps the things that you're doing right now at the start of your career are going to be the building blocks for sort of where you want your career to go. I think that's always really important, because I think that it's easy, especially early on when you're doing things that feel small to get
Mm-hmm.
lost in that minutia.
Yep.
But to really keep that sort of macro perspective in mind is not only going to help you sort of remind yourself like, nope, I'm paying my dues right now. Like I got to go through this like crappy menial work to work my way up. You know, whether it's that or you know, again, just allowing you to be much more helpful and effective as a member of a team or in helping your boss drive results. I think that it's really, really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, most people don't love their first job out of college. Like, it's okay if you don't love your first job out of college. Most people have to start somewhere, I don't want to say at the bottom, but somewhere at the bottom. My first job, I had to actually feed paper into a printer for like an hour for one day. And I thought, why did I go to college? What am I doing? But that is it. That is work. And we all have been there. And those are the places where you start, and then you start moving up, and you will be 10 times better when you get to that higher position because you understood the big picture and no task was too small for you to do. Not to mention people respect you a lot more when you're like that too. So I think that's a great tip. Big picture thinking is always key. So like, don't jump to another job right away. Maybe stick it out at a company because it's a great company. Even if you don't love the job, maybe you can switch, you know, departments or something like that.
Absolutely. I think that it's so important. So the next one that I wanted to talk about, number 3, is sort of an overarching appearances matter thing. And so, you know, of course, like I sort of talk about this on Memorandum and just, you know, dressing appropriately and professionally. And, you know, I think it's so important to make sure you're dialed into your company culture and dressing appropriately. However, I think that appearances also matter in your work product and your work ethic. So, you know, in terms of work product, you know, always being attentive to details so your colleagues and your bosses, you know you're organized and reliable. You know, similarly, sort of committing to be the first person in the office every day and the last person to leave. This sort of face time can be maddening, especially, you know, I remember early days, like I really didn't have anything else to do, but I'm sitting at my desk until 9 p.m. at night or whatever it is. But it really goes such a long way, whether it's how you present yourself in dressing, whether it's making sure you have no grammatical mistakes in emails, or just, you know, sort of showing to managers that you're sitting there every day, like always there waiting, you know, willing and eager to help. I think that it's so important in underscoring your work ethic and your commitment to the company. Because, you know, this goes back to what I was speaking a little bit about earlier on. You know, when you're just starting out your career, you may be talented, you may be hardworking, but people don't know you yet. You don't have a track record. And so you have to do these little things that may feel small, you know, to help signal to your colleagues and your bosses that you're a person to respect and take seriously. And so this means dressing appropriately. This means making damn sure that you don't have spelling mistakes in your emails. This means you know, being sort of that person that's always seen there, you know, ready to go. And I think that, you know, it's just really important because they just don't have anything else to judge you on. And so, you know, if you kind of build up this reputation of being this positive, reliable person, this person that presents themselves well, both in written communication, in work product, and physically, that's what helps signal to your bosses, okay, I think I could bring her into this meeting. I think I could trust her to send this to the client. And so it's those little things that you have to that are small signals constantly to your bosses that eventually open the door of the next step.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, we had a Contessa on, and she's the VP of HR at General Electric. So she obviously knows what she's talking about. She's been working there for, I think, almost 40 years.
Wow.
And she called it your hallway reputation. And I love that, because when we think about our appearances and, you know, how we send emails and how we talk to people, we don't really think about like it maybe on like that micro level, but really what you are is you're creating this hallway reputation. How are people going to think about you when they run into you in the hallway, or when they start to have a conversation about you in the hallway? And I just liked the way she explained it, because we all can picture a hallway, you know, conversation happening. And someone put in the chat to dress for the job you want, which is sort of one of those tips that I think a lot of women have heard over and over again, especially if you are the youngest in the office. You know, coming to work and looking professional and dressing that part will make sure to remind them that you're not this new recent grad who doesn't know anything. You're a person who is serious about their job and wants to take on more responsibilities and wants to be included. And so I like that you focused on appearance, not just being what you're dressed in and your hair and your makeup, but also your conversations, how you speak up at meetings, how you send emails. I think those are really, really important for people to remember, because it is sort of this whole package, this whole hallway reputation that you want to be representing.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a good point. You know, there were so many opportunities early on where the person who was supposed to, the person senior to me who was supposed to be at that meeting was sick, was held up, had a flight cancel, and all of a sudden my managing director is like, I need another body in the room. And if, you know, and I saw this in so many cases where whether it was my boss or a different boss, and they don't pick that junior person because they're not dressed appropriately. So keeping that in mind, when I would go to the office every day, you have to be prepared to be pulled into a senior level meeting at any time.
Anytime.
So I think that's always good to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. Someone in the chat even said that, so Kristen said, working in advertising, that doesn't mean I have to wear a pantsuit every day, but I still think it's important to pay attention to how I'm dressing every day. It's helped me advance in my career so much. And it's just so funny, because like you want to say like, oh, what you wear to work doesn't matter. And I hate to say it, but it all matters, you know? So, you know, if you're not going to care about that, then you're sort of just taking yourself out of the running. And why would you do that, right? Like, women, we're not trying to take ourselves out of the running.
Right.
So thank you, Kristen, for sharing that. I think it's good to remind people too that, I mean, Mary wasn't probably wearing a pantsuit every day. You know, certainly you're not wearing a pantsuit every day now. And I just think that's important. Don't feel like your style has to be, I guess, like overly routine and formulated either. Feel, you know, like you said, pay attention to the office culture, which is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, you know, has been important to me on Memorandum, is that, you know, I started in a very formal work environment where, you know, a lot of days I was in sort of very formal suits. But I think no matter whether you're in that sort of, you're a lawyer or a banker or an accountant, whatever, a consultant perhaps, that does wear that very formal work uniform in some ways, or you're a teacher and you know, you're a kindergarten teacher and you're wearing jeans to work, whatever it is. I think that, you know, it's really important to sort of assess the company culture, look to senior people, whether that's women or men, and always sort of err on the side of a little formality. It's always better, in my opinion, to be overdressed as you're sort of gauging what the right thing to really wear is, but otherwise just, you know, presenting yourself really professionally, sort of no matter what the environment is. It looks like maybe we lost Lauren. Can you guys see Lauren?
Oh, I think can you hear me, Mary?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, but you can't see me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna hit refresh really quickly.
Okay.
I'll refresh, hold on 1 second.
Okay, cool. I love seeing all of these questions on the side. I've been talking too much and need to like tune into these. And we also have questions below that we're going to answer once I get through all of these top 5 tips. But love seeing all of these.
Okay. Can you see?
Okay. Oh, here we go.
Here we are.
Yeah, now awesome.
Cool. So I think we're on tip number 4, right?
Yeah. So tip number 4 is, and I will apologize in advance. Number 4 and 5 might sound cliched, but I promise they're not. Number 4 is ask questions. Ask questions in every possible situation. In your interview, you have to come with questions. Because at the end of every interview, it's pretty formulaic. They're always going to say, "Do you have any questions for me or about the company?" And if you come with questions, that's just showing, your prospective employer how much more engaged you are, how much more interested you are in the company and in the job. And I think that it's always so impressive. But the other thing that I see, and I was absolutely guilty of this when I was starting. When you're starting in your career or you're starting in a new role, you can have a tendency to feel a little embarrassed that perhaps you don't know certain things.
Right.
Or you feel that perhaps asking questions is going to show like your ignorance.
Right.
But what you don't realize, or what I didn't realize as much early on, is the jig is already up. You could not possibly know how the company operates in this, that, or the other way. Right. And so I think it's so important. So many people, early in their career are afraid of showing that they don't know something, but all of your bosses know that you don't know. And by asking questions, you're able to not only be so much more effective, but you're also able to show your bosses that you're really eager to contribute, that you're really eager to sort of move up that learning curve so that you're a more effective member of the team, and also just that you're really interested and invested in your job and in the company.
Yeah, I was a recruiter for years before I was running Career Contessa, and I always tell people, of course, I'm going to ask at the end of the interview, do you have any questions for me? And I am looking for really interesting questions so we can have a more interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And what I hate is when people, the only question they have is, so what's the expected next steps for the role? And I'm like, that I would have told you that anyway. That's not a question. The question should be, where do you see this role going in the next 5 years? How do you see us working together and you managing me? What's going to be the feedback style? Like getting really specific about the questions. And I mean, that's just in the interview, process, because you do want to pick a place that's the right fit for you. And you guys need to be asking really good questions. And that means you need to be researching the company. But also to your point, Mary, you're talking about also not just questions in an interview, but also asking questions when you're in the job. And as someone who now manages employees, and I'm sure Mary's had this too, we want to know that you're interested in what we're working on, and you're not just showing up every day and kind of like, doing the job and then checking out. So when you ask questions, it can start conversations with an employee that maybe you wouldn't have had. And now because you've had that conversation, you've been able to express that you're interested in XYZ project, and now you're on XYZ project. So, if you guys have to put a neon sign on top of your computer that says ask questions to remind yourself, just remember that there's no such thing as a dumb question. Yeah. And asking questions is better than staying quiet, because people don't know when you're staying quiet.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think that, I've had that recently. I've been interviewing for various positions recently, and that's always such a game changer in an interview, is when people have really thoughtful questions. And it's not that hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
not. And most people don't do it. Yeah. So when you do it, you stand out. Right
away. Absolutely. So my 5th and final one is, like, for me, the most annoying thing to hear. And you hear it a million times, and it's to network.
Yeah.
Wah, wah. I hated hearing this. I still hate hearing this, but it's the most, it's one of the most important things that you can do. And what, and I, to get more specific about what I mean by that is especially when you're starting out and you have perhaps an idea of what you want to do at that company or what you want to do in that industry. But, for example, there were a bunch of people, I didn't study finance, but I went into a finance job. I worked with a bunch of people who were hired at the same time as I was that did sort of major in finance and have a business degree. And so often people that perhaps studied their field academically think that they kind of know everything there is to know, when in fact, if you talk to anyone, it's completely different, the sort of real, like, on the job situations than the finance that you studied in a textbook. And so I think that it's so important as you're sort of trying to get a feel for where you fit in the company or where you want to take your career, to talk to as many people as you possibly can. And just emailing any senior person at the company and saying, I know you're super busy. I'm so interested in learning more about what you do. Is there 15 minutes on your calendar that you can fit me in? Yeah, I'm getting a ton of feedback now. Oh my God. 1 second. Let me see here. Okay, I'm going to refresh quick. Hold
okay. Guys, you have such great comments and conversation in the chat. I love it. Looks like you guys are going back and interview questions that you asked. Oh, you're back. Can you hear us?
Okay, it's worse this time, so I'm going to try again. Let's see. Try again.
Okay. And guys, we're gonna move on to your questions next. So feel free to upvote any of the questions that are in the Q&A that you also agree with. Feel free to do that or add your own.
Okay, let's try this. Oh, that's better. Yes. Okay.
All right. Yay.
So I was talking about networking. So I was talking to senior people and trying to get 15 minutes on their calendar. But the other thing that I think, is so important is when promotions come around, the more people who, it's often, especially if you're at a big company, it's not just your direct manager who's making those decisions. A lot of times it's a group of managers across business lines. And so whether it's that sort of group of senior people that are making firing decisions because they have to cut people, or making promotion decisions, the more people who know you across the business, the better, your chances will be. And this is another sort of example of a situation where it actually doesn't matter as much, how good you are at your role or how effective you've been. Not to say that those things don't matter. Of course, those matter so much. But it's an example of another sort of, what did you call it, Lauren? Hallway reputation or something?
Yep, hallway reputation.
Yeah, so it's another example of that I think is really important to keep in mind. And the last thing about networking that I would say is, a lot of people who are starting their careers or perhaps not starting in the role or the company that they see themselves in long term. And I've had so many friends who say, I hate my job, but I don't know what I want to do, or I don't know what else is out there. And I think that getting out there, emailing people at a company, sending somebody a LinkedIn message or emailing someone at a company that you think is interesting and just asking them if you can take them out to coffee, or going to sort of industry events. I have a really good friend who was working as an accountant and he hated it and he didn't know what else he wanted to do. And so he just went to every random event in industries that he was interested in. Yeah. And eventually he got connected through a friend of a friend to this seemingly random startup that he accepted a job at, and now the startup has blown up and he's doing like amazingly well. And it's really exciting to see somebody who, yeah, they weren't in that first job that was their dream job, but they were proactive about getting out there and learning and getting exposure to other industries that they found more interesting, and eventually it paid off.
Yeah.
And so, because by converse, I see so many of my friends that, like I said, are stuck in a job that they don't like, and they're sort of paralyzed and they don't know what to do. And so I think you have to get out there and learn as much as you can, whether it's within the industry or in an industry that you'd like to move into.
Yeah, I like to always say that clarity comes from engagement. So even if you're not sure what it is that you want to do, start engaging. Go to events, have those coffee chats with people, whatever it is. And I guarantee the minute you just start having coffee chats with people or having like phone conversations over LinkedIn messages with people, you will be so much more jazzed about everything. You will be like, I'm just, even if I'm still not sure about this job, I'm hopeful that there's something else out there that I'm going to be really excited about. So remember, you guys, clarity comes from engagement, and you have to, engaging on the couch with Pinterest and Instagram, it doesn't go very far unless you're turning those Instagram, conversations into coffee chats. So, my tip to everyone is, if you haven't already started setting up some coffee chats or one-on-one conversations, start doing that, because at a minimum, it's going to make you feel better to just be talking to other people. So I agree, Mary. I'm sort of over the word network, but there are a lot of, there's a lot of
we need a new name for it.
We really do. Please, somebody come up with a new name for networking, and we'll use it all the time. Yeah, exactly. Anyone in the chat, we're looking for ideas. Well, cool. So this is actually perfect. We have about 15 minutes left, so we can tackle some reader questions. So thank you, everybody who submitted questions, and for upvoting them. That really helps us know which ones to go with first. So Hannah asked, how did the skills and experiences you had in banking transfer over to the fashion and tech space you now occupy? And more generally, what are the skills you recommend recent college grads new to the workforce to develop as they begin their careers? So it's kind of a two-point question. So we'll start with the first one, which is, how did your skills and experiences that you had from banking or finance transfer over to fashion and tech?
So for me, I'm always a big proponent of, if you don't really know for sure what you want to do, think about a job that will be a good foundation, that will give you sort of a set of analytical tools and a framework that you can apply to future jobs. And that was so true for me, starting in finance. I think that learning how to evaluate a business, how to look at a balance sheet, all of those sort of foundational finance principles, not only applied to Memorandum and running the business side of my blog, but also has helped me immensely in sort of running Trove. And I think that, in fashion, a lot of people are very creatively talented, but they don't know how to run a business. And they don't know how to think about, things that are very important, like accounting or not that I do my own accounting, but just the awareness that I need an accountant,
right.
And things like that. That's just immensely helpful. And then also, for starting a technology company, being able to, having a perspective around monetization, about sort of how to run a business. On the finance side, it's similar to the fashion industry. In technology, a lot of people will have amazing ideas, or perhaps be really talented engineers, but again, they just don't know the business side. And so it's been incredibly helpful in speaking to prospective and existing investors, that you can speak that I can speak sort of fluently to the finance side of things. That's been immensely helpful. And so I think that, whether it's starting in a job, like at a bank or anywhere else, it's those kinds of foundational business tools that are transferable to anything and really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the reason why we call them transferable skills in the industry, again, I was a recruiter before, is because almost every job has transferable skills. So keep that in mind, you guys, as you're thinking about jobs. Is like, I worked in an admissions role before. I was a recruiter, so there were transferable skills in that job that I could move to my next one. And then Hannah's second part of her question is, what are the skills you recommend that recent college grads new to the workforce develop as they begin their careers? I mean, I think all the skills you sort of just mentioned, have a great attitude, always think macro, take into account your appearances, ask questions, and network are great. Is there maybe anything in addition to that you think recent grads specifically should have?
It really depends on what you want to do long term. I think one thing that is really important is just being able to express yourself well and being able to communicate well in a business setting is so important, and it is something that I see a lot of people struggle with. And it goes back a little bit to, one of my early tips and sort of appearances matter, and part of that is sort of how you communicate, especially written communication. I think is if you are super talented and hardworking and whatever, but if I get an email from you that's got run-on sentences and grammatical mistakes and spelling errors, and you don't know how to sort of communicate well, that's I'm probably not going to be as eager to sort of correspond as I might if you are a little bit better at that. So I think that that's something that's really important, just learning how to communicate well. And professional correspondence is very important.
Yeah. Someone just put in the chat, they said vocabulary. When I interviewed younger individuals, some of them couldn't communicate. And I think that's similar to what you're saying. It's like, there's communicating with your friends and your family, and then there's communicating in a professional setting. Hannah, that's a great question. Thank you. Okay, so the next one comes from Katrina, and she says, any tips on finding fashion-related careers in cities that aren't fashion hubs like New York and LA?
Yeah, so I think that thanks to the internet and social media, you really can work in fashion from anywhere. However, it really depends on what you want to do. Are you a writer? Are you a stylist? Do you want to be a designer? Do you want to create a product line? For example, if you're a writer, contact any digital fashion publication and try to get a job as a freelancer. You can write from anywhere. And what you probably don't know is that a lot of the major publications out there, everything from Forbes to Fashionista, they have writers that live in remote places that are contributing stories. So that's, if you're a writer, that's an avenue. If you are a, aspiring fashion stylist, you can start a blog or work with a local boutique. To give you a couple of, some of the biggest bloggers, fashion bloggers in the world are from, places other than New York and LA. For example, Rachel Parcell or Christine Andrew, they live in Salt Lake City, and they're two of the biggest bloggers in the world. And so, I think that is certainly, an interesting path if you're interested in styling. If you're an aspiring designer, or you have an idea for a product line, I would focus on creating that quality product. And again, I think you can sell from anywhere. I was just at a conference last weekend with Kendra Scott, who talked about how many people in New York City and LA turned up their noses at her because she was starting this little jewelry company in Austin, Texas. But if you have a quality product and you work hard, you really can do it from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Katrina. That's a great question. I like your advice about finding a boutique. Every town has a boutique. Okay, let's move to, so we talked about some graduation stuff already. Let's see.
There's a question.
Sorry, I just want to get a couple that are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go on.
There was a question I saw earlier about hating my job, and where is that one? Something about I hate my job. Is it too soon to find another one? I was just seeing that. I think that's.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I wish I could find where it is and who asked it now, but it was a question. She said something like, I hate my job and I want to switch into PR. You know, is it too soon to find another one? I think she said she had just started her current job a few months ago. So I think that's a really good question, because I think that's something that is faced by a lot of people who are in these first jobs and they feel like they hate it. Of course,
yep.
Like there are degrees of hate if your job is like really a toxic environment, and you know, if you're sort of like, you know, emotionally unable to handle it anymore, like of course you should extricate yourself from that situation. But assuming that it's not, you know, it's not that bad, and it is just something that you don't like, and it's clearly not what you want to do long term, I think it's important to keep a few things in mind. The first is, and this is something that I think a lot of people aren't always told, and I saw various friends and colleagues of mine make this mistake early in their career, where they just started and they were like, oh, I hate this. Prospective employers sometimes worry about people who frequently change jobs because it can look flaky. So so, you know, this person mentioned that they wanted to start a career in PR. I would encourage you to network and learn as much about PR and where you might be interested in working before jumping ship. Because the last thing you want to do is jump into a new role and find that you hate that too. And then you're potentially in a position where you've gone through 2 jobs in less than a year. So that is something that you want to avoid. And of course, you know, I think it's like a very millennial thing, and I'm obviously millennial, so I can we can say this about ourselves. But I think that it's a very millennial notion that it's like, follow your dreams, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like all of these sort of amorphous things that sort of ignore the fact that, remember, you know, you have to still pay your rent when you're following your heart and chasing your dreams. And so you have to think about a backup plan financially. How are you going to pay your rent next month if you don't find a job right away? And keep that in mind, that if you quit today, you know, you may not find a job next week or next month. And so how much runway do you have financially while you're sort of working on finding something else? So I think that's important, because I've also seen people who got that first job really quickly and they think that it's that easy to, whoa, I just like whipped my earphone here. You know, found a job really quickly and think that it's always going to be that easy, and it's not always that easy. I know so many talented people with impressive resumes that have taken a year to find a new job. So I would just keep those things in mind.
Yeah, and the good news is that question came from Brittany, and we were able to record your answer for that.
Awesome.
So
cool.
That's really helpful. And Mary, I couldn't agree more with you. I think before you guys jump ship, if you're unhappy in your job, talk to as many people as you can that are doing that job and work for companies that you're interested in. And I always tell people, when it comes to the job search, I really don't encourage people to focus on the job as much as the company. You know, company culture is really, really important. So for the person that wants to work in PR, especially, I mean, we've all heard the horror stories. There are some PR agencies out there that are, you know, not great work cultures. So also spend this time while you have it in the job that you're not super happy, maybe not at work, but research some other PR companies in your area that you know have a good culture, they have cool clients, what is it that you like about them? So do yourself a favor and take the time to do the work now, because the job search is going to be long anyways. And I think that's always important to think about. Again, being macro, think about the big picture, not just jobs, job hopping because you're trying to end this immediate unhappiness, because it might not actually make you happier in the end.
And also just remembering what we talked about earlier, that everybody has to pay their dues. And pretty much everybody has the first job that they hate, and they're photocopying or they're grabbing coffee.
Yes.
And you have to put in the work, and like you said, remember that macro perspective of your career, that this is just a stepping stone. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap us up for today's webinar. Thank you, Mary, for the fantastic advice. I think these are 5 very important things that every woman should, remember as she's starting her career, and even going throughout your career. And I think that was what was really special about this webinar is, yes, these are great tips if you're starting out and you get to kind of start off with that refresher or reminder. But for all of us in our careers, a good attitude is never going to hurt us. So thank you, Mary, so much again for sharing your advice and telling us a little bit about your story, and from banking to fashion to tech. I think it's really interesting. If you guys haven't checked out the Trove app anymore, definitely go check that out, because like we were saying, it's one platform, which is like unheard of today when there's so many other places to go to. And then Mary, just really quickly, because there are some more people that maybe potentially have questions, what's the best place to reach you at? Is it to see, go to your blog? Is it to follow you on Instagram?
Yeah,
what
so if you have additional questions, follow me at Mary Orton on Instagram. You can ask questions there. Of course, you can ask questions on my blog as well, which is memorandum.com. And yeah, download the Trove app. It's in the Apple App Store. You can also follow the Trove app. It's at the Trove app on Instagram. And let me know what you guys think. I'm excited to have you try it out.
Yeah, this is a very active group, so I'm sure they'll have no problem communicating and letting you know. But we'll go ahead and let you go. And thank you again so much for the great advice.
Thank you. It was so much fun to join you today. I'm excited for all of your other webinars coming up.
Yes, thank you. Okay, bye, Mary.
Bye.